Stories are like stars. They're individual, shiny and bright. They move us, they inspire us. Narratives are a collection of stories, as constellations are a collective of stars. Right?
Already, words of wisdom.
Culture is like a galaxy, ever and expanding and evolving. Culture is made of narratives, just like a galaxy is made in part of constellations. And all elements of a galaxy, story and narrative, are in a constant state of motion and interaction, each influencing and being influenced by others. So culture is not static. So these are not my words. This is an analogy by the culture group, who are our kind of ally philosophers, I would say, in considering the question that we're posing today, which is, can art and culture accelerate change? And in the many months that all of us, many of us here in this room, have been planning this town hall, we'd had this analogy and these words from the culture group in the back of our minds. And then yesterday, this happened.
Yes.
Jamie, did you see it? Can you tell us what it is?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. So yesterday, some very interesting, when big scientists sat together and they had 6 different press conferences across the world, because it was a very collaborative approach. And what they presented to us after a lot of 15 days of building up was this image. And a lot of people were like, what is that? So that is the image of a black hole, which is about 26,000 light years from us.
55 million.
Yeah, no.
55 million.
No, it's billion kilometers away from us. But
miles,
yeah,
kilometers.
Miles and kilometers. But this is the light years I'm talking about. So it's really very far away. I mean, our human race will evolve and die many times for us to reach there. It's that far. So for the first time in our human history, we have been able to photograph a black hole. And this is the image that have been created by huge collaboration of scientists across the world. And it is quite a momentous achievement for the human civilization and how deep into the void and into the darkness we can look at. So it's a great day.
Amit and I were freaking out about this yesterday and texting, although I didn't actually put him up to that completely. So you can imagine, I had that analogy in my head, and then this happened yesterday. And it speaks to the change that Tanya and I decided yesterday to make to all of our plans. Everything we have been thinking about doing. Hey, Aaron, welcome. Hi, Katie. Which is that question, it's Einstein, right? It's Einstein who first imagined the possibility of black holes. And you recall in the opening plenary, right, Jess Search quoting Einstein about imagination and knowledge. And then, as Amit was saying, this project was truly an international effort, the Event Horizon Telescope. And I was reminded of what Bright Simon from M. Pedigree spoke of yesterday about trust and collaboration. That is what it took to pull this off. And so Tanya and I yesterday basically scrapped all of our plans, our sort of gorgeous plans for the opening here, and decided to recognize that what has happened in the forum the last few days sped everything up for us. It accelerated change, it accelerated our sense of possibility. And we thought when we planned this, that this would be kind of the outlier event, be like the weirdos talking about art and culture, everybody else's business plans and budgets and social impact. But we were wrong. As always, the audience, the participants, ahead of the organizers, ahead of the play. And so we decided to mix it up and recognize that this has been everywhere in the forum in these last few days. I'm thinking about Ai-jen Poo, actually. Remember in the opening plenary, she talked about how crucial her work is to address the question of who has the power. That's what she's asking a lot in her work. But what did she say? She said, we think of economic power, we think of political power, we even sometimes think of social power. But she said, what about narrative power? And it's that work with David and Holly and participant, that question with Roma about narrative power. And she also talked about, she and Jess talked about populating the narrative environment. For us, that's our galaxy culture question, right? And yesterday I was in Journalists Under Fire. I don't know if anybody here went with Pat Mitchell and Witness and others, right? Some of you, it was incredible, right? What a session that was. And Yvette from Witness said, impunity thrives in silence, in the absence of stories. So we've mixed it up, we've opened this up. I want to go to Tanya now from Four Freedoms, but are there any other things that people have heard just on this question before we go in, or do you want to tell us who you are a little bit, or do you want to just be quiet for the moment? Are there other things that struck you? Anybody on arts and culture? Yes. You can, but you must do it on the mic because everything is going to be on the mic today.
This seems also on topic, according to my Twitter feed.
Oh, that's so good.
Right?
Tell
but the
that
person
story.
who took the actual picture of the black hole is a young female scientist, Katie Bowman.
What she did is she worked on an incredible team. She developed the very complicated and unusual algorithm, essentially the coding, to try and correctly and accurately depict this object. And she was a graduate student as she was developing this with this incredible international team. So it's a brilliant story. I'm going to introduce Tanya now, who's here with Four Freedoms. And I just want to read you their mission, just quickly before I turn to you, just one sentence of it. She'll tell you about Four Freedoms, but listen to this. I don't need that. We believe citizenship, we believe citizenship is defined by participation, not by ideology. We are a hub for artists, art institutions, and citizens who want to be engaged, more engaged in public life. So Tanya, over to you.
Thank you. So as Brenda mentioned, we completely threw out our plans and recalibrated our approach because of all the powerful sessions that have been happening over the last few days. And I was telling Brenda yesterday, I was showing her the notes that I had been taking during and I was telling her that I am an optimistic nihilist by nature, by birth, and that being here these last few days has amplified both sides. But what it's also made very clear is that we have this community of people who are chipping away at the systems that place corporate interest over human interests, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm representing Four Freedoms, which is an artist coalition that was founded by the artists Eric Gottesman and Hank Willis Thomas. Last year, as some of the origin story of why we're here today, last year they launched what was the largest creative collaboration in U.S. history, with more than 700 activations through exhibitions, town halls, billboards, and public programs in each of the 50 states, plus Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. In addition, they reimagined the iconic Four Freedoms, F-O-U-R, images of Norman Rockwell. They were iconic, but they were mostly white. So what we did is we remade these images to reflect a more inclusive and representative America. And they made it to the covers of Time magazine, the New York Times, and into the social media feeds of Alicia Keys. So this town hall is the continuation of a beautiful partnership that we began with Sundance at the festival this year. And we are so grateful to Skoll for allowing us to continue this partnership here. This is actually our first ever international town hall. And we, at that town hall, our question was, can art save democracy? Which was a provocation because it implies that there's a democracy to be saved. Today, the question is, can art and culture accelerate change? Which is not a provocation, but an aspiration. And we are going to hear from inspiring people who are, by coincidence, all women, who are making that aspiration a reality. The format, and this is where you all come in, is that after each of the speakers gives a short presentation, we're going to open up the floor, and Brenda and I will be out there with our mics getting on our game show. and hope that you will participate, engage in a conversation, and then we will try to leave each other with takeaways that you can take out into the world and into your own communities. So we're going to get started with Judy Kibinge. And to say a few words about Judy, this is her second year at Skoll. She is a filmmaker and a founder of DocuBox, which is an East African film fund based in Nairobi. She came as a Sundance Skoll Stories of Change fellow last year, and this year returns as a Forum fellow. She's also working on a short fiction film with another Skoll grantee, WSUP, and I believe we have someone here from WSUP. Water and sanitation for the urban poor. Judy, take it away.
Okay. Ooh, I've never used one of these before. It's very cool. I was looking for a mic. Yeah, culture, customs, social behavior of a particular people or society. But what if that particular people didn't exist 60 years ago? What if they came together 57 years ago? And what if somebody with a pencil just like this one simply drew an area on a map and said, you 47 different people are now the same? And that's what happened there. Kenya was free. We had this day of joy, this day of independence, this day of breaking away from our colonizers. Around this time, my father, just a small boy, was watching his fellow young boys singing circumcision songs by a river, and he wasn't allowed to come close and he wasn't allowed to learn those words because they were backwards. What if that culture that was supposed to bring you together took your words away? And right about then, my aunt Tabitha was given a set of beads. I have no idea what my beads from my tribe look like. And her mother, my grandmother, threw them in a pet latrine because they were primitive. So what if culture is taken away? What do you replace it with? All kinds of things have begun to happen in the country that I am from, the country that I love. And these are the kind of headlines that we look at every day. And these sorts of behavior, greed and corruption, have sadly begun to feel like the thing that we call culture. And right now, there is a particularly big scandal happening. And it's a damn scandal. And every time you look in the papers in my home, you see headlines like this about damn cash disappearing. And we just shake our hands and we say, this is us. This is what we have become. How can art possibly change that? Something so ingrained. Where are our beads? Where are our songs? What do we fight this with? This is a typical part of Kenya. I live in Nairobi. I live in the city, but much of Kenya is rural. It's a very unequal space, a very, very unequal country. And Mutumo is about 260 kilometers from where I live, very, very dry. And when people want water, this is where they walk to, a small borehole that has had things, water dug up. And they come with donkeys and they come with mitungis. And they carry water away with jerry cans. And then from amongst them, a farmer was featured as a hero in a film called Thank You for the Rain.
When the rain falls, every farmer feels like running away.
Lakini nina mwezi tamizi tamemana suita wakela medi change. We kwatha yola wagwatiala nongi na withie wikite sai bandu wazi ngisa kugwa kuna atialela nengutia miti ya nondo mana. No mwijira ne beba ngona umwe balo. The other season we were crying, no rain. Now we are talking of flood. Everything is being contradicting.
It's crunch time at the COP21 in Paris. The objective and requirements are clear. We need a universal agreement on climate.
I'm going for my family's future. This is my chance to share my story. The story that I have is an alarm to everybody.
They have polluted our atmosphere for 200 years, and their wealth is based upon our poverty.
What are the qualities of a good father? Who is a good leader?
Are you nervous?
nervous?
No, 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 no. Yeah, I'm not scared in any way. I'm ready. I'm ready.
So in the middle of that picture is impact producer Emily Wanja, who is with our hero and star of the film from Mutumo, Kisilu. And I mean, Wanja, I think you're the only person who can tell us what happened when that film was taken to Mutumo.
So, thank you. So, in a nutshell, so that's Kisilu right there, who you saw in the film. And in that whole background where you have a people who do not trust the system, who do not trust their government, these people, because I was new to this place, they had no reason to trust myself or us who are handling this film at this point. And so when we went to talk to them and we were showing them the trailer, and we asked, if there's one thing you'd want to happen to you as a result of this film, what would it be? And they were like, yeah, okay, anyway, we'll just tell you. So we really would like a dam, because our main problem here is water. So if you can build us an earth dam and like some education and irrigation farms around it, that would be great. So for us, we've seen the ability of taking that film, which captures their reality, and you take it in front of a decision maker or a change maker who then realizes, oh, I have something that other people in the world are looking for. And so what happened is this film, we managed to get some support to give them exactly what they asked for, which was this earth dam. The community articulating their own problems and their own issues and what was most urgent to them, brought together all these collaborators, government, organizations, and funders. And so as we speak, this was the groundbreaking of that dam.
And whose land was it on? And what did he say?
Pardon?
Whose land was it on?
And so one person from the community said, if ever really this happens and it comes to pass, I'm going to donate my own piece of land for that dam to be built. Well, a year and a half later, we surprised him. We were like, we're here. We want to build a dam. And so he gave his piece of land. So now we're waiting for the rains. Thank you for the rain to come, and then this dam can collect the water. And yeah, so this is us, the inauguration of the dam with the community, and all of us lifting our hands saying, yay, we are on for this, and we are completely 100% behind it. Yeah.
Thank you. And so, just to wrap it up, as Brenda said, culture is dynamic, culture changes. Just because things have been taken away doesn't mean that we can't fill those spaces, those voids up with new things to believe in. Making films, making art, that is what keeps our culture growing and changing and evolving into something positive.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
And I mean, I will say the impact campaign for Thank You for the Rain was one of the most innovative media-based impact strategies that we've seen in many, many years of doing this work. So it's truly, truly incredible. Next, I'm going to introduce Jennifer Pahlka. So Jen is the president and CEO of Code for America, and for those of you who were here last year, you know that she won the Skoll Award last year. But thanks to Stories of Change, which is Sundance's kind of 11-year partnership that Sandy Hertz from Skoll started 11 years ago, long before I was at Sundance, which was only like 6 months ago, has brought together social entrepreneurs and storytellers and artists over many years, people like Wendy here who've worked on it, Rick, where's Scarlett? We have a lot of fellows here from that program. It's been evolving over many years. So we dragged Jen and her team to a lab in the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, and she's like, what am I doing here? Which was basically your same reaction when I was like, can you join this town hall? You're like, really, why, again? But I wanna say one thing about Jen just before you come up, that what I learned in those 4 days about the work that Code for America does, how they think about imagining creative possibility and understanding what government could actually look like and how it could serve us, and the focus on implementation and governance, not just on elections, it changed my mind, actually changed my mind about how I understand the state, how I understand the government, and how I understand my own government. And that, for me, was a creative, mind-blowing experience that happened just as we were listening to you, as we were thinking about story ideas together. So you have forever changed that for me. And now you can say whatever you want because it'll all be good. So over to you.
Say anything now.
Okay, come on up.
Okay, thanks. Do you mind if I come up on stage because I'm short and it's. Thank you. That was a very generous introduction, and I'm just going to stay there. And also very creative. And thank you to everybody at Sundance for continually involving me in this thing that's creative, because I feel like our work is very, can be very technical. But I wanted to share a story of a project that I've been working on with our team that I think has challenged sort of notions of what's possible in government, and I think it really does have sort of an imagination aspect to it, despite it being very, very small compared to black holes, and very, very, I think, far from what you would think of in terms of a very creative process. So imagine that 10 years ago you were arrested for possession of marijuana. And because of that, now you have applied for jobs, but you don't get them because you don't pass the background check. You can't get student loans. You can't live in public housing. There's actually 4,800 statutory limitations on your life because you were caught possessing marijuana. Now, in California, I'm going to talk about California, but in fact, this is true in almost every state in the United States. Laws change. In 2014, we passed something called Proposition 47, which took a wide range of non-violent felonies and reclassified them as misdemeanors. And then a couple years later, we passed Proposition 64, which actually made marijuana not even illegal anymore. And yet, the law has changed, but you as an individual still have that felony on your record, because what we have expected you to do is a process that is kind of mind-bogglingly complex, confusing, difficult. And in fact, you would be among only about 3% of eligible people if you'd actually gone through that process and gotten that felony record, that felony cleared off of your criminal record. This is an estimate, but we think about 3% of people have been able to do it. I would describe it to you, the process to you in greater detail, but we don't have time, and you would be very annoyed by the time I was finished talking about it. So I won't annoy you with it. But I will share sort of our sort of journey into how we might address this issue, given that there are so many people who are suffering from this unnecessary burden of a criminal record. So a couple of years ago, we started, we just basically did what we do. We put the form online and made it a lot simpler and easier to understand. So you could start the process without having to go to a legal clinic between 9 and 11 on Tuesdays. You could just do it from your mobile phone. And then we would follow up with you by text message to help you get through the rest of those pieces. But in about 3 years, we were only able to get about 10,000 people through that process, and there's hundreds of thousands of people eligible for this relief in California alone, and millions nationally. And we started to say, why are we making people do this at all? In fact, if you think about it the way we think about it, there's a database. There's actually 2 databases, but for simplicity's sake, the State Department of Justice has a database. Your record is in that database. There's a field in the database, and there's a code in that field that means a felony. We can change that to a code that doesn't mean a felony. We don't need 10 steps and going through the court systems and judges and lawyers every step of the way. We were very lucky to find a forward-leaning district attorney right in our own backyard, DA George Gascon in San Francisco, who said, very publicly, I would like to clear these criminal records under Prop 64 in San Francisco automatically. And so we went to him and said, great, what does that mean, automatic? And he said, well, we're not making people petition anymore. I'm having paralegals stay late, and they are filling out all of the forms for these people. We are one by one taking records off the state database, manually scanning them, manually filling out forms, and then they go through all the process. And I said, well, great, how many have you done? They said, well, it's been about 6 weeks, and we've gotten 20 of them done. And we were able to convince him that we should do that a different way. And at the same time, there was a law that had been proposed in the California State Legislature that would require every county, not just DA Gascon, to automatically at least assess the available records. And we called up the state legislative director and said, is the governor going to sign this thing? It sort of surprisingly sailed through the assembly. And they said, no, because we've done an analysis on it, and it's going to take like 7 million paralegals over 30 years, and the state can't afford it. And we said, can we talk to you about a different way of thinking about this problem? And in fact, we did convince, we didn't talk to the governor directly, but I think we did convince the governor to sign the bill. And then a couple of weeks ago, we announced that we did the first automatic records clearance in San Francisco. We cleared 8,132 records. Our piece of it took about 19 minutes. We just went down to Los Angeles and announced that LA will do it. We think that'll be more like 50 or 60,000 records just in that county, and then we want to do that. 5 minutes. Yeah, but yeah, it's going to take like 22 minutes something. So we're going to hopefully do all of California. We'd like to do all of the country and just remove this burden, because it shouldn't take 27 years to give people the justice that they need. And thank you. But what I really walked away from that with was just the sort of stunning difficulty of getting people to think about the problem differently. And I think it's certainly just the notion of like, hey, it's a record in a database, and that sounds, intimidating to people sometimes to think about it that way. But I'm trying to make it less intimidating. I'm trying to explain to people that like, if you've ever changed the address in your friend's address book, you've done that. It's just very accessible. But also, I think we have to think about justice differently. We can't be happy when the law passes. We actually have to say, if we haven't gotten justice for these people, if we haven't removed these intense burdens on their lives that keep them in a cycle of poverty and incarceration, that's not justice. And 27 years to do something administrative isn't what we should be accepting in our society.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, there's just one thing I wanted to say, but before we introduce the next person, Tanya, that reminds me, I was there were so many things that I took from yesterday's award ceremony, but one was Mariana, did I see Mariana? No. Mariana and Harambe said, we need to fall in love with our problems, make sure we're falling in love with our problems, but not falling in love with our solutions. And I felt that represents that so well. You're coming up with a different solution. So
we love that line. We say it all the time.
So good. It's in. I'm quoting. And come on in if you want to. There's plenty of seats, and there's even couch space up here. You can come sit next to Indhu. Come on. Yes. Come on up. Yeah. Another artist from Lagos who I already met. So. Go next. Who's next?
Next we have Shirley. Shirley Abraham, who is also, like Judy, returning for her second year at the Skoll World Forum. She came first with the Stories of Change Fellowship, and now as a Forum Fellow. Her debut feature, The Cinema Travelers, co-directed with Amit Madheshia, premiered at Cannes and won India's National Film Award, among many other prizes. One of her new projects, First Time Stories, is part of a collaboration with Amazon Conservation Team, a Skoll awardee. Shirley.
Thank you. Thank you. So every time I'm confronted with this conversation around art and social change, I start to feel a little bit nervous, as you can probably tell right now. I start to feel like what Zadie Smith, the novelist, describes as someone who's third in line to the throne. You're aware of possibilities, but you must not bank upon the outcome. And I think it's primarily because of my experience as a filmmaker, where I'm observing people just living out the smallness of their lives. We on an everyday basis, we usually don't live out big ideas. We live out what is tiny and what is granular, and very often it has meant deep and profound things for me, as I hope to share through the course of this conversation. I once found myself meeting with a group of acid attack survivors. These are young women who have survived the most brutal, dehumanizing form of violence. Most of their attackers are men who have been stalking them, and once they realize that their advances are either rejected or ignored, they could go to the market and just buy a bottle of toilet cleaner, and this is corrosive acid, which they could fling in the face of these women. And upon impact, these women have felt their faces literally melt into their hands. And when I met them, they were trying to deal with this very deep sense of physical trauma, but they were also trying to attempt what looked to me, sorry, I hit my mic, mental and emotional impossibility. They were trying to write letters to their attackers in a bid to try and see if they can attempt the idea of reconciliation. And that was something that really spoke to me. And we'll watch a clip from the film that we made, and I'll then share a few thoughts about how I think about art and social change.
जैसी कुछ होता है वही चीज़ वापस दोहराई जाती है, वही चीज़ कभी इसलिए मैं नाम नहीं लेती कि मैं अपनी स्टोरी बताती हूँ, बट लेकिन मैं पता नहीं क्यों जैसे ही नाम लूँगी ना ऐसा लगेगा सामने खड़ा है एसिड फेंक रहा है, उसके नाम के बारे में बात हो रही है तो मेरी फीलिंग चेंज हो रही है, मुझे अजीब फील हो रहा है, पता नहीं क्यों।
पागल हो गया एकदम।
ऐसा लगता है कि नाम लेते ही ना वो बिल्कुल एकदम एग्जैक्ट सामने आ जाएगा और उसका चेहरा मेरे सामने आ जाता है।
और फिर क्या होता है?
अजीब होता है कि क्या? बिल्कुल अजीब सा होता है, मन खराब हो जाता है, एकदम मन मुंह का स्वाद खराब, पता नहीं क्यों, एकदम कड़वाहट बनाती है मुंह के अंदर बिल्कुल, और बहुत मन भी ना दिल भी अपने उसमें नहीं रहता, बहुत अजीब सा लगता है, पता नहीं।
पर वो कड़वाहट सिर्फ आपके शरीर के अंदर है ना? हाँ, वो ठीक हो जाएगी। पता है बाबू, इतना जब बुरा कोई भी करता है ना तो कड़वाहट तो हो जाती है इस तरह की। पर ये पता है, इसको लेके परेशान नहीं हूँ मैं इसलिए इस चीज़ को ना उतना परेशानी से नहीं देखता है, क्योंकि ना ये तो समय के साथ ही ठीक होगा। मतलब आपके साथ कुछ भी हादसा होता है ना, जैसे ये भी ना, ये घाव बहुत समय बाद बदल गए ना, अब जाके ऐसे हुए हैं कि इनमें ऐसे छू लो तो भी कुछ नहीं होता है, पर आज के 4-5 साल पहले इन्हों ऐसे छू भी दो तो डर लगता होगा ना कि कहीं फूट ना जाए, वो ना हो जाए, है ना। धीरे धीरे समय सही हुआ ना, ये जिंदगी में भी वैसा ही है यार।
उसी तरीके उनका नाम भी मेरे लिए एक बहुत बड़ा घाव है।
मैं कितने भी भुलाने की कोशिश कर लूँ, कल वो दिन याद आ रहा है तो और कुछ याद ही नहीं आ रहा, वो उसी के बारे में सोचे जा रही हूँ। मैं 17 साल की थी जब मेरे ऊपर अटैक हुआ। मैं अटैक से पहले बड़ी मस्ती करती थी, स्कूल जाती थी, फिर स्कूल से आने के बाद मैं खेलने जाती थी। अटैक के बाद मेरे स्कूल भी छूट गया और खेलना भी। तुमने एक बार भी नहीं सोचा कि तेजाब डालने से कितना दर्द होता है। मेरे घर वालों को तुम पर इतना गुस्सा है कि कभी तुम बाहर दिखोगे तो तुम्हें मार डालेंगे। गुस्सा तो मुझे भी आता है तुम पर बहुत, पर मैं ये सोचती हूँ कि क्या तुम इस लेटर को पढ़कर और जेल में सज़ा काट कर दोबारा मेरे को या किसी और के साथ तुम ऐसा करो।
So after the film came out, I was constantly in touch with these women, and every time they would say that we were just watching your film before you called. We've been watching the film all day. And I mean, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I work with the assumption that mostly nobody watches what I make. But I try to really investigate into why is it that these women would love to watch themselves over and over again. And I think I sort of understood the direction in which the answers might lie, but only much later. These were a few images that we were looking at while we were making the film. These are images of Egyptian sculptures with their noses broken off. And this is the way in which a lot of these figures have come to us through history. And art historians and curators would tell you that this desecration has happened because there is a certain connection that we as human beings make between the essence of a deity and her image. We all believe that that the essence of a deity is contained in her image. So once you've defiled this image, you've defiled this deity. And by extension, we sort of believe that about human beings. And this was what had been guiding the violence that had been brought upon these women. And somewhere they had begun to then embody the sense of shame and this sense of deprivation that society brings upon them. And so for a very long time, they had hidden themselves inside their houses. They would not come out, they would hide their faces if they were to ever, let's say, travel in a bus. And I think because the film tried to transcend their physical situations and start looking at an emotional landscape, and you know, somewhere start looking at them as people with a fully formed sense of personhood, it sort of somewhere brought them to the point of feeling that a certain sense of visual justice had been done to them. And this is something that I always come back with whenever I'm thinking of art and social change. You know, these are choices that we are making actively as artists. These are choices that determine what will be remembered and how it will be seen. And I think to the extent that art drives or catalyzes social change, a lot of it has to begin from within the frame. And I will really put my money on that sense of finding justice of representation. That's
Thank you, Shirley. Holly Gordon, up next.
I was just wondering what I was going to say.
After that, I know, right? So we have Holly, and then we're going to come to Indhu. And Holly's the Chief Impact Officer of Participant Media, and I've known Holly's work for many years. She's worked in this field in many different roles at a global level, in nonprofits and all kinds of organizing over many years. And so come on up, but just to embarrass you before you start, I want to just thank you and the team at Participant. And you know, Aijen, we were quoting you at Aijen left, right? All right, she was here, she left, but
is she gone?
She was here and she was gone. But you know, we were quoting Aijen so much this morning, and what you and David and the whole team have been doing at Participant, you're really pushing the edges in new ways, I would say, in the last couple of years in this work and thinking about it in incredibly creative ways. I mean, the kinds of Latin American filmmakers that and the kinds of representation. I mean, we were talking about Yalitza this year, but also Danielle Vega, who was in incredible film, Fantastic Woman, the first transgender woman, another Oscar-winning film. So congratulations to you all. But I'd be curious to hear, since you live in this every day and your whole team at Participant does, how you're thinking about these questions.
Well, I think that's incredibly generous.
And true. I'm only speaking truth today.
And I was actually going to start, so I'm relatively new to Participant. I joined a year and a half ago, and my background my background first initially was as a journalist, and then I was part of a project called Girl Rising that was, at the heart, had a film that told 9 stories of 9 girls who live all around the world, and who I like to say were extraordinary, but actually rather ordinary. And the goal was to use storytelling to raise visibility about the challenges that girls face to education, the barriers that boys and girls face structural barriers, like not enough schools and teachers who don't show up, but girls have a social set of barriers that they face, and to make those visible and personal. And to do something with that campaign, which was to create alliances around the world with other leaders on the ground who are fighting those battles every day, and alliances around the world with decision makers and leaders, whether they be in the corporate sector, the foundation sector, and the policy sector, who share that same vision and value. And so for me to come to a place like Participant, where that was a very grassroots type approach that we took to building a campaign, a global campaign. And Participant, and it sort of started from a journalistic lens, which is, right, what are the facts of this? And tried to layer story in. Whereas Participant, and I've been thinking about this difference between journalism and documentary actually this week a lot in some of the conversations I've had. Participant starts with story and humanity and and then reaches from this extraordinary platform that we have because of the level of the expertise of our content and the distribution ecosystem in which we live. But what I was hearing this morning is that the sort of the intersection is the same, right? The journey is the same, and I wrote it down while you were talking, Judy, which was you start, and Shirley, you too, you start with community and a lived experience and character and a journey. And then you move that with creativity and narrative, you translate that. So your job is to be a translator. And the translation comes through imagination, making a story personal, which we just did in that kitchen scene, making it proximate, which we went to Kenya today, right? Making it emotional, and making it human, getting on a bicycle with your baby and where I'm going to Paris, right? And then you bring it to an audience, and what I thought was so interesting about the way you and Wanja built your effort was you were clear about the ask, about what you wanted as the outcome, right? So that came from community at the beginning, right? And then outcome comes at the end. And it's funny, I just spotted Amy because she was saying, we had a meeting yesterday where she was saying, so it's the what, and then it's the so what, and then it's the now what. And if you forget about the now what, you get them going with the so what, and you got them, and then you need to have the now what, and the now what always has to happen from a sense of community. So we heard a little bit of, so I was actually asked about talk about Roma, and what was so beautiful about that at the global level is that it started from a personal journey, Alfonso's personal journey, and his understanding of community, and his understanding about, oh, we have a time check, sorry, I'm going on and on, his lived experience, and then the character of Yalitza. How many of you have seen Roma? Great, and if you haven't, you must. The character of Yalitza, and his so what from the beginning was wanting to have his Libo, Yalitza, seen by society for the role that she played at this very personal moment of his life, right? She was a rock with his mother and getting them through that period, and yet he understood that in Mexico, domestic workers have no rights. Right? And so the power it's the same kind of power, but at a global scale, and the power of personal, proximate, and story in the story of Roma comes through partnering with the organizations and the leaders who are doing the work every day, which is why partnering with iGen nationally in the United States, and then with CASE and Semillas and leaders on the ground in Mexico who've been fighting for domestic workers' rights for years was integral because they're community, right?
I mean, I think one of the things also too, just to
interrupt my soliloquy.
No, I'm so into it. I could do it all day. I'm so into it. But is one of the things that has struck me is the cultural impact of an indigenous woman, Mexican woman, as the story protagonist, as both an actor and as the character. I would say we don't even know that yet. We don't know what possibility that will even accelerate.
So I was going to make two final points, which is there's the political power and enabling environment that the film created, both here in the United States, where a domestic workers' bill of rights is being introduced to Congress, and you heard New Mexico just passed a state domestic workers' bill of rights very recently, but also in Mexico, where the day after the Oscars, the Mexican president made a commitment in his morning press conference to ratify the ILO Convention 189, right? So that moment of, and that for the first time, in December, the Supreme Court voted to give domestic workers access to Social Security protection, and they have launched off the back of Roma and what they're calling in Mexico the Roma effect. They have launched an enrollment of 2 million, a pilot program to enroll 2 million domestic workers across the country into their Social Security program. And it's fabulous. And at the same time, you have Yalitza on the cover of Vogue magazine, presenting beauty, an indigenous woman, Mexican beauty, in a global fashion magazine that then transfer. We like to joke that a participant, if you read The Economist and you read Us Weekly, like, we want you. That's what we want. We want everyone who's reading the hard stuff and the soft stuff too. And so that's how you start to move culture, because you move it with precision and scalpel with the so what, and then you move it with culture and beauty with the sort of broader introduction of humanity that maybe people weren't seeing. So
thank you. Yeah.
So now we're going to go to our last speaker before we bring it out to you for your comments and questions, so please have them ready. What we've done here is we've kind of unintentionally covered many different ways, many different forms of art and creativity that people are using to push forward change. Through film, through literature, through technology. And now we're going to go to theater. With Indhu Rubasingham, who is the artistic director of Kiln Theatre. Now, in the same way that by coincidence, all of the speakers today who are catalyzing change are women, Indhu is by coincidence a Sri Lankan like me.
Hi.
Thank you, Indhu.
Hi. Like any good live theatrical events, one changes and moves. And so I'm just going to do something a little bit different. But I just want to tell you a bit. So basically, my answer to that question is yes. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Absolutely. I love theatre. I'm deeply, deeply passionate about it, and I want to sort of tell you a bit why. But first of all, I'm the artistic director of Kiln Theatre, which is a theatre in northwest London, and there's a context to, if for those of you who don't know, Kilburn is in the borough of Brent. Over 130 languages are spoken in its schools. Wow. It is one of the most diverse boroughs in London in terms of many different immigrant communities. And the mission statement there is the unheard voice being part of the mainstream. Different lenses to the world, and a local theatre with an international vision. Therefore, if we're speaking locally, we're speaking internationally. If we're speaking to those communities, if we're getting those people into the theatre, if we're telling those stories, then we're empowering them and giving them a sense of entitlement. And that's one of the things we talk in our team about. Everyone is entitled. How do we make everybody feel entitled? And so I'm just going to go, I had a thought, I'm just going to go really personal in this narrative, because I've been in the industry for just 20 years, and when I persuaded my parents to let me even do a drama degree and get into this career, when I started, I sort of felt like I was in the last bastion of the British Empire, because it was like the minute I moved down to London, it was like everything was like, put to my race and my gender all the time in a way that I hadn't noticed whilst I was growing up. And to the point where, even to start off with, so I just graduated from university, I'd got this brilliant sort of traineeship at theatre. And I know part of the reason I got that interview was because of my name, because they were like, we've not seen a name like that. We know that we should get... and I was told to have a career to have a career, I had to set up an Asian theatre company. And I was like, but I'm not interested in that. That is not what's brought me to the arts or to storytelling. I'm interested in the complexity of identity and the nuances of the world we live in the grey. So skip forward to a few years ago. So I'm now the artistic director. And even when I started in London, because I was one of the first non-white artistic female directors in London, quite a few journalists would go, oh, what's it like being the first, da-da-da-da-da. And I'd go, tell me what it's like to be a white man, and I'll tell you what it's like to be an Asian woman. It was a real anger and a real frustration that I wanted to be seen like all the others. I wanted to be on my own terms, and I resisted and I resented. So I've told you a bit about the context of the theatre, and this all joins up in a very non-linear narrative. But it was, so one of our programmes that's really, really important to, so we do our plays, which are the productions on the stage and stuff, but we do an incredibly, which I am deeply proud of, and I don't do it, that's what I can say, incredible outreach programme, which is going into different communities and getting into the theatre. For the size of our theatre, the team are really committed into how to get people into the theatre. And one of these programs is called Minding the Gap. And we work with, and it only happens in our borough, we work with 11 to 18-year-olds who are basically not in the proper school system. They're in a porter cabin. Do you know what a porter cabin is? Like in the side, often siloed at the side of the school. They're not integrated in the school system because their English isn't good enough. So basically, these group of kids are recently arrived immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. So then this porter cabin, 5 days a week, one teacher. We work with them a day a week for a year, and this culminates. It's drama skills, it's communication skills, it's confidence. It's using drama to empower, to give a sense of identity, a sense of community, and so on this particular day, and I love this program, and everyone loves this program, and it's the one thing we will not get allowed to be cut. Do you know what I mean? Funding-wise, and so one day I'd been at the Arts Council, which is the body that gives money to the theatres, and I'd been at a meeting, about quite a senior meeting, and in this meeting, again, I was getting irritated because they were saying, "Oh, it's really great, Indhu. One of your the positions. What's brilliant about you being an artistic director is that you're a role model." And I said, "I don't want to be a role model. I just want to do my work." And I was like, kind of quite agitated and quite aggressive to the system. Anyway, I came back to the theatre and we had the showing on our stage. And so there were over 140 kids on the stage, hyper excited, about to do their presentation. Yes, it was rough, it was raw, it wasn't kind of the most polished things, but they were so excited. And I went on and introduced, and as I walked on stage and I was looking at them, and it was just to the theatre staff and to the other students, it wasn't a public performance in that way. And as I stood on the stage and I saw most of these young people had a similar skin colouring to me, and they saw me as the leader of the organisation. It just a click, a penny dropped. It is okay to be a role model if these people feel that they can be in this position of power. And it was, I'm just talking about the personal transformation of acceptance. But then what happened at the end, I went and thanked them, and this young person came up to me as I was on stage and said, "Can I talk? Can I say something?" And he was very timid, and he said, and he was very timid, and he just said, and it was formal, and his English was tentative, and he sort of stood on the stage and said, I want to thank my teachers." He was very formal in his language, and he just said, "I came to this country, I was nobody. I stand on this stage, I'm somebody." And that's the transformative empowerment that accelerates change, because nothing in this country, in London, had given them that sense of ownership and sense of identity. And that is what we do in theatre. And that is theatre creates that community, that collective sense of identity, that ability to belong and to live in nuance and to live in the complexity of debate as opposed to the black and white, and gives that sense of expression. It attracts the rebels, it attracts the outsiders and stuff like that. But I just want to end on, and what I love about it is that it's so small and it's so you do a piece of, theatre can't exist without its audience. It's not, it only exists in that moment because there's this collective expression and this community of people coming together to share something. And so compared to film, compared to other mediums, it's small who it can reach us to. But I love how everyone, governments and power bases, are absolutely threatened by it. That's what makes me realise we're really powerful. And to the point, and I was going to give a long thing of examples of throughout history how amazing and brilliant a theatre is because it's done this. I mean, you only have to look at Trump's reaction to Hamilton. And I was looking at Trump saying, and him going, "It's not very good." Yeah, go figure that. But I just want to show that. I mean, and every government. I mean, the British government in India in the 19th century, the censorship laws it brought in because of community theatre. But yesterday, in London, a play opened in a 90-seat theatre, which is, if you just, called Pahlka. At the Royal Court, like I said, 90-seat theatre. It speaks to the issues around methods of peaceful protest in Tibet and was written in consultation with the Dalai Lama. Abhishek, the playwright, and this is a quote, My males are under surveillance. I've also been offered a lot of money to sell the play to a Chinese theatre and give up my license. I've been offered a lot of money to stop it from being staged, and was also offered money to make 3 important changes in the play, all of which I refused. I think one of them was like, there's a dialogue with the Dalai Lama, and it was like, he says no. No, it said, the question was the Dalai Lama involved in the protest? And the answer is no in the play. And he was asked to say yes. Change the line to no to yes. Changes the narrative. But and all of which I refused, obviously. A lot of important information I have is illegal in China. If I enter China, they will put me in play. But, I mean, yes, it's very scary, but it's brilliant that we have that power to come as a collective, as people.
Let's come to you. Yeah, people can go, have a loo. Yeah, Daniel, and then Jessica, I'm looking at you. But start over here. Thank you, Indhu. That was, you left us.
Thank you so much for putting this amazing panel and for sharing all these stories. I'm Daniel Buchbinder. I'm director of Alterna, which is an organization that works with social entrepreneurs in Central America. Talking about catalyzing the acceleration of possibility and change. A few years ago, I saw Spotlight. Spotlight.
Who's seen Spotlight? Another participant, right? I was thinking it was Spotlight for
Can you say
America.
a little bit
Sorry.
about?
Yeah,
for
say
those who
about
haven't
Spotlight.
Seen it?
Yeah, so
The
this
essence?
is the real story of the Boston Globe about covering the stories of Catholic priests abusing children, exactly. And so basically it opened it blew my mind when I understood who was behind that amazing movie and that amazing story. And basically it amplified the way I saw the work that I was doing with social entrepreneurs in Central America. The thing is this, we've worked with over 1,500 entrepreneurs, mostly with agriculture, sustainable fashion, energy. And at least in Latin America, the creative industries are not kind of well seen as being kind of impact entrepreneurs. It's a weird thing. So after Spotlight, we took a go and we designed a program to identify and to cultivate social entrepreneurs through creative industries. And that was all because of Spotlight. And yeah, so that was amazing.
Thank you. So good to know.
And on that way, because, and I'm sorry for this question, because that might be a little bit of a turn-off. But because we work with social entrepreneurs that are mostly for-profit and that need to make a living and to have a business model, where does metrics stand in specifically for you, Holly, but for all of you? Do metrics play a role in your models, in your organizations? And if you can share a little bit about them, please.
Yeah. You want to take that, and then we'll kind of keep going. We have about 15, 20 minutes.
So participant is a, should I stand up?
Yeah.
So participant is a double bottom line company. We are a for-profit company, and I think that's an incredibly important part of our DNA, because it really demands that our content is commercially viable, because we want to reach a large audience, right? So that's an important piece of our DNA. And so the metric there is that we're trying to sell to a distributor at an advantage, right, for less than we spent. On the impact side, we are 100% thinking from the very beginning as we're architecting we architect a theory of change, which is like a business model, but on the social impact side. And anyone who works in media knows that it's pretty basic. And you can't, because we're working at scale, you can't always measure at scale. So I have tried to do sort of proximate measures. So create your theory of change, and then we count things, right? How many people see things, blah, blah, blah. And then we look, most of our outcomes, so our outputs we count, but most of our outcomes are almost always collaborative. Because
the number of partnerships, the depth of those,
we are but a star in a constellation as part of a galaxy. And so our job is to really actually create constellations around us and try to light up the galaxy all at once, and we just have this special rocket fuel sort of tool. Every now and then there's a movie like Spotlight that comes out of nowhere, seemingly, right, and opens people's eyes in a way that only global content. I would say that An Inconvenient Truth did the same thing.
Right.
Right? And so those can be lightning in a bottle moments. But really, the thing that I think is most exciting about content and art as a story, as a change-making tool, is that it invites collaboration. It's only as good as the partners that you put around it. And I just did want to recognize Aaron Huey in the back there
We see
from
you, Aaron.
Amplifier. As the dude creating some art and amplification. He's taking, I don't know how many of you know about Amplifier's work, but amplifier.org, he creates art that ends up being posters and the thing I think is so extraordinary about his work is he lets everyone participate in a celebration of change through art that you can download. It's massively accessible.
Right.
So more things like that, where we can.
Yeah, I want to, and I think speaking of that question about scale, there's one here, but also I'm gonna take moderator's advantage. Do you mind if I come to you? So because I think it's a deep question. I've known Jessica Le Pen for 30 years, like back in the bar days and women's street theater, and now she is the acting ambassador of the United States to South Africa. So some things change, but I woke up this morning thinking about this, and I was like, soft diplomacy. Right? I mean, the United States government and your work, it's a huge commitment to culture and art. So I'm just curious, partly in that question, in this context, how you're thinking about that in diplomacy. And if you could stand up, please, thank you.
Hi, thanks, Brenda. So I think it's an interesting piece to bring into the conversation, right? Because in many ways, the starting point in the room, I think, is a little bit how do we change government? But there are elements of government that are also about change. So striking for me, listening, is we funded a project with Hank Willis Thomas in South Africa. We amplified and did a lot of work with Girl Rising in Rwanda. And that's just sort of like what I've done in the last couple of years. So there's a way in which government, I think, can be a part of the ecosystem and or simply is, and I think that's useful to think about, though it's also perfectly useful, and we'd be crazy not to say like, okay, wait, does who's funding and how they're funding matter? How does that impact content, right? That's part of responsible engagement, is thinking, where's the money coming from on this? But for us, we spend a huge amount of money, but also of energy in the cultural space because it's such an obvious way of asking and engaging on hard questions. Right. So particularly in South Africa, then the focus of all of our, a lot of our cultural programming is on shared challenges, shared histories, shared issues around race, current and past, and then what's the learning from one another. And so on the soft diplomacy side, I would say if you start from a place of humility, which is that we have something to learn, that's going to completely open up a different relationship. And one of the best ways of doing it is, in fact, through cultural programming, because then you can talk in a much more honest, open way about shared challenges.
Thank you for letting me take advantage of our 30 years of friendship. We're still friends.
Hi, thank you for this amazing panel. My name is Jay. I work at YouTube, and one of the questions that I work mostly with nonprofit and social impact content creators. Hi, Holly. And I'm interested in sort of getting feedback from you guys on, we like to think that technology accelerates change, and we tell ourselves that a lot, but I think we don't necessarily listen as much as we should to cultural content creators like yourself to say, what is technology's role, what do you want it to be, and how can we do better?
Come back here.
Yeah.
My name is Godfrey. I'm from the MasterCard Foundation. My question really relates to social media. I live in South Africa. I come from Kenya, and every day I'm following what's going on Twitter especially. And so, for example, in Kenya, you have a group Kenyans on Twitter what typically happens is that whenever there is a scandal, for 3 days, Kenyans on Twitter go crazy. There is a different bit which looks like art to me, and this is where I need to hear your thoughts. People make videos, just really a funny video about something, making fun of a politician or making fun of a situation that is not comfortable and all. Now, I have seen instances of people talking about something that someone has done wrong, and this going viral and forcing people to resign. It's not necessarily art, but there is the other bit where there is a particular meme that has gone viral. It's clearly humor. It brings attention to a particular issue. So this brings me back to the question that Holly Gordon was asking about. How do you translate that spotlight on a particular issue into action that is beyond just getting someone to resign?
Dorothy up here, and then we'll come back to that question.
My question is about how do we make sure that the content of what we're communicating through the power of art is the right content. And what moves me to ask that question is because I got stuck on one of the videos here, the one of the woman who'd been brutalized by acid. Because for me, in my experience, both with personal trauma and as an experienced peer counselor trainer, is that she actually needed to cry. And that man was telling her not to cry, that if she waited long enough, there would be enough scabs on it that she could get over it. When, for me, the right content would have been somebody welcoming her tears so that she could move through it and actually heal instead of scabbing over.
We have the interesting perspective of an educator, right? The educator coming into a film. And whenever in doubt, I feel like, quote Ben Okri. Do you know the Nigerian poet? While we come to the next question here, I just want to speak to that. Here is what Ben Okri says: "Beware of the stories you read or tell subtly at night, beneath the waters of consciousness. They are altering your world." And I think it's incredibly important to recognize that there is power of story, and narrative can work many different ways. There are racist tropes, there are misogynist narratives, there are cultures that that are changing in ways that we are different than some of us might want. So I think that question is a deep one, whether it's specific to that film or not. But we have some other over here. We have about 5-10 more minutes. Let's keep
I think
going.
if we take 2 more, and then if anybody in the audience and any of our speakers would like to comment on the points that have been raised, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up with some takeaways.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that amazing discussion. I'm from Myanmar. My name is Kai. I'm from Myanmar Youth Empowerment Opportunity. I myself am not an artist, but I'm really trust in art and culture can change everything. So I have one question that, how can the voice of an artist with a vision of social change be heard through the art world if such works are not appreciated in the country?
Deep, very good.
Yes.
Right. Nisha?
Hi, my name is...
The end of that question. Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
How can the voice of an artist with a vision of social change be heard through the art works if such works are not appreciated in the country?
I also wanted to say thank you for the really great panel and such great content that's being created. I work for Ubongo. I'm a former documentary filmmaker turned kids cartoon producer. But I wanted to ask about, how much are any of you looking towards even more mainstream or kind of pop culture media, and what can we do there? I mean, films like An Inconvenient Truth and Spotlight are somewhat mainstream, but still, there's a lot of people who are just watching action movies and American Idol and who knows what else. Are any of you trying to do any outreach to say, create maybe a pipeline towards the types of content that you're creating from kind of the more just, the rest of the noise of what else is out there. And I think, with things like Black Panther and other things, we're seeing opportunities for change there, but I want to know, towards your work.
I think that question of audience is deeply, who are you trying to reach? Is there a mainstream? Does the mainstream exist anymore? Where? And what if it's not in the country that you're trying to get at? Please. Do we have a...
So we really have to wrap up.
Yeah, we're going to wrap.
We've been given the 2-minute mark.
Should we have Karen
Can we
then...
extend for 2 minutes more?
Yeah, we can extend.
I don't want anyone not to feel like they did.
See, I'm getting a nod back there from Caspian. They love me.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I definitely believe that art and culture can accelerate change.
Right
and
into the mic.
I definitely believe that art and culture can accelerate change. My question would be, there's so much great content and stories. I learned so much today just listening to the speakers. And I'm like, how can you get that out quicker through technology, through social media, through inspiring others? And a lot of times I believe sometimes there's so much out there, and as an individual, people think they can't make a difference, but collectively you can, or actually if you just take one small action and you affect 1, 2, 5, 10 people, you're already making a big difference and you're already part of the process. So how can you get these stories out there?
That's a great question, yeah.
Indhu, Shirley, Judy,
we have one
Jennifer.
more.
Ooh,
Sorry.
keep
Wendy.
going. Oh, because we got that nice reprieve. Good,
Yeah.
Wendy.
I'll
That was
try
so
to
good.
Quick.
Oh.
Should I go?
Yes.
Okay. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Wendy.
And I run an organization in the U.S. called the Alliance for Media, Arts, and Culture. So I think about this stuff all the time, every day. It's why I get up in the morning. And I'm obsessed with this notion of all of these amazing projects that demonstrate that kind of are a proof of concept that art and culture can accelerate change. But I'm also profoundly disturbed about the system within which the modes of production of that art and culture is so broken. And so we started this conversation with data, and we all used to talk about the people formerly known as the audience, because now the audience is participating. But more recently, it's kind of the data formerly known as people. And so much of the communities, many of the communities that we're looking at in this work, have no voice in the production.
Okay, who's making
it and for whom? And if we have to go deeper than project-based thinking. We have to go into systems thinking. And if we do that together, I think we'll be able to get the change.
And Wendy, what do you think? Do you think culture is an important part of that, or do you think it's economic?
No, it's inextricable. Culture is inextricable. Data only makes sense when it's in a cultural context. Anything that we're trying to do, the economic shifts we're trying to make, they only matter in a cultural context.
So you feel it can have systemic effects?
It will only have systemic effects if it's inextricably tied.
What's another yes for the question?
So I think of all
Tanya,
the...
please.
Thank you for these amazing observations and questions. We have a very short time to try and summarize them and address them, but I hope that the conversations will continue outside of this town hall. This is what these town halls are intended to do, to catalyze civic discourse, to bring people together that otherwise might not meet, might not engage with each other. So we've heard about the uses of social media, the importance of voice when your voice is not welcome in your own country, how to reach an audience, who is your audience, and who's the creator of those stories. Is it the right person telling that story? Is it the right story being told in the right way? And how can technology help? So is there anyone who can address those in 1 minute? Or would like to take a stab at it, addressing any of those questions? Oh, yeah.
Brave.
Hi, I'm Laura Herb from the Skoll Center for Social Impact Entertainment at UCLA.
Perfect respondent.
Yay! I'm relatively new. I will start with that caveat, but a sort of answer to Nisha's question about mainstream entertainment, because I think about this constantly, and I think movies are complicated. So I'm going to talk about TV instead, which is, I think even what you're doing with children's cartoons. I feel like you're reaching people week by week online, as you were telling me yesterday, and you can tackle issues in a way that is kind of hidden. And I think television reaches sort of both really wide audiences and also really niche audiences that are seeking out stuff that just looks entertaining, and it's easier to kind of slip in some of the issues that you want to get across without people having to be like, oh, there's a documentary about that thing that I am already fascinated by. I think it's just a way to be a little, I don't know, sneaky in a good way. So that's, in terms of mainstream, that's what I always think of as TV being sort of part of the answer.
I can try to do
You have a mic.
Oh yeah, I can try to do a little summary, which I'm not going to get all the way through, but there are folks that are working. There was just actually a conference in Los Angeles that was sponsored by the Ford Foundation, MacArthur, and others to reach creatives. And there were a whole host of leaders from impacted communities, whether it be immigration rights leaders, gender rights leaders, who came together to talk to that creative community about the kinds of stories that they could be telling and integrating that into the plot lines of everyday entertainment. So that's happening. I love the comment around data, formerly known as people. I think both data and technology are both deeply, I think she made a blessing.
Wendy's right there.
Oh, Wendy, there you are. Amazingly, they are both amazing and challenging. So data can tell us a lot about how different kinds of characters are portrayed in our content. What percentage of women characters are written to be agreeable, for example. I will give it to you, 85 to 90% of women characters written to be agreeable, which means they don't disagree with anything. So when you raise your hand and you disagree, no wonder everyone's like, what's wrong with you, right? There are organizations like Storyline Partners, Doc Society, Pop Culture Collaborative that are also trying to put new lenses into our content. They're trying to think about who's telling the stories and who has the right to tell the stories, and right? And then how can technology help? Technology, how do you get content out there? In a noisy, messy world, you look for allies, and how can you use technology? Use technology to find your allies, right? So always be looking for the people who share your beliefs, and they're not always going to have the same beliefs about what moves you and what doesn't. But if you look for your allies, it's through the crowdsourcing that's now possible around the world that we can actually accelerate change. And I believe, and I think Participant believes, that humans are fundamentally good. And so we're finding, but evil gets a lot more visibility. Right. But the more we can make good visible, we start to lead posses. And posses can start with 2, 3, 4, 5, and they can grow to millions. And technology is the only way.
Oh yes, Jen.
I just wanted to echo I love that line, picking up again on the, what is it, data formerly known as people?
Great.
We have sort of a seminal, this blog post that one of our fellows wrote called People, Not Data. And as an organization that's known for data, I don't know how meta I'm allowed to get here,
meta.
but
Go meta.
There's a really broken narrative in our society about data and what data is good for. And I think, to change the narrative around technology and data is another part of I think what we all need to sort of engage in, because there's this sort of heroization of technology and data that, if you kind of interrogate it a little, is clearly like not working. And we wrote, a colleague of mine wrote again about this after we had this sort of framework of people, not data, after the 2016 election in the United States, was like, obviously, our data did not tell us what we were. He wrote, advertising, focus groups, and quantitative polling don't work anymore. And this sort of, again, Code for America doctrine. Number 1, understand your users' needs. Number 2, show, don't tell that you understand those needs. And 3, meet your users' needs. And he observed that the president-elect at the time won our election by doing a bit of one and a lot of two. So that's, really, he obviously resonated with a lot of folks. Our polling did not tell us this, right? We're seeing the data, but not the people behind the data. and that the extent to which the system or the establishment is broken and that it's not doing these three things. So what is the data actually good for? Only in the context of actually understanding people's needs.
And if we don't connect measurement and theory and measurement, we run up with unreliable numbers. We are coming to a wrap, but I'm going to leave it with Tanya.
So I think one of the takeaways for me is that there is an urgent need to rehumanize the world, and that art and culture is a way to do that. And I hope that you all, after today, will become even more ambassadors for the importance of linking art and culture with social entrepreneurship. There are some things that art can do in particular ways that pivot consciousness. Art provides levity and comfort. Art sparks emotions and ideas. And art can catalyze change. I think we heard yesterday, as you were talking about, impunity thrives in silence. Impunity also thrives without witnesses, and that's what a lot of you are providing, witnesses. In a dark moment, in a nihilistic moment, I had said to a good friend of mine, Farai Chidea, who's at the Ford Foundation, that the bad guys ultimately win. I don't actually believe that everybody's fundamentally good. But you're a nihilist. But I'm a nihilist. The bad guys ultimately win, and she responded brilliantly, but the storytellers also win. So on that note, thank you all for being here.